Chris, how's it going, man?
Good, Rem. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thank you for joining Dads with Mikes. I'm really happy to have you on today. And Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I am 40 years old, soon to be divorced, so I'm not actually divorced yet. I do have two kids. They are basically 14 and 12. The 14-year-old is a boy, the 12-year-old is a girl. And I am based out of Phoenix, Arizona in the US.
Okay, cool. Now, before I say anything, when you tell people that you're soon to be divorced, what's the number one comment that you don't want to hear so that I don't say it to you? Is it like,
Uh,
is it I'm sorry to hear that, or you're probably
well,
annoyed of hearing that, right?
That's funny. I don't get tired of hearing that, but that is always the first response.
Right.
So my response back is, "Don't be sorry." And then it quickly turns to, "Okay, well, I'm happy for you." Um, so yeah,
Okay. All right, great. Well, then I won't say it then. Is that okay?
yeah, sure, no problem.
All right, Chris. All right, so you mentioned it. So can I ask you, how long were you married and what happened?
Sure, yeah, no. So we were married for 14 years. And without getting into really any specifics or anything, but it was just basically um, we had both come to a decision that it wasn't working anymore, and it would be in the best interest of our family if we went ahead and got divorced. And so we made that decision just about a year ago. And so it's kind of been a little bit drawn out, and not because of any um, fighting or anything like that. It's just been like a longer process for us.
And so this happened about a year ago, you mentioned?
That's when we decided.
Okay.
I would say it is something that had been discussed for some time before that. But
How did the kids take it?
yeah, that's a good question. So when we decided, we sat down with the kids just together and kind of explained to them what was going on. Um, And I think initially they took it kind of hard, but I think they both knew that it was coming, um, and ultimately that it was they agreed with us that it best decision for the family.
Wow. Okay. So there wasn't like any long conversation, and like not convince them, but make them see why it's the best decision. They sort of already understood.
Yeah, they already understood, and without getting into details, it's just the certain environment and dynamics within our family, was probably not all that surprising. So yeah, I think overall they took it uh, well enough. And as we might get into later on, I think it's just a constant thing that needs to be checked in on and just see how they're doing and adapting and just dealing with life, with two separated, divorced parents.
So, it's a lot more common these days, right? Maybe I don't know. To me, it seems like for sure in the past it was frowned upon. But do you still get that feeling when you tell people or when you share this information with your friends or other people around you at work? It
Yeah,
seems to me like it's a lot more commonplace than it used to be.
yeah. Well, I think the number that's like a general consensus is that it's like just about 50% of
Is that
marriages.
still the number?
Yeah, I
I
think
feel
that's
like
still
it's
the
been at
number.
50 for forever, man.
Yeah, no, I know. So it might not be, more common now, but with celebrities getting divorced and stuff, maybe it's like more in your face. And there is more nuance to that number, whether it's your second marriages, third marriages, like those numbers actually increase, which makes sense, I think. But in terms of like the view of it, at least within the people that I've told closely, um, at least to my face, there hasn't really been any judgment or negativity about it, other than, like I said, a lot of people or most people will just view it as a sad thing. And like you, one of the first questions is, well, how are the kids taking it? So, um, but yeah, no open judgment from anyone directly to me.
Okay, well, that's good then.
Yeah.
But why do you think that is? Do you think maybe that people are they hiding now their how they feel about it, or they actually just, it's one of those things, because it's so common, like we said.
Yeah, I think I think it's probably maybe the people that I associate with don't necessarily are not so rigid um, about viewing divorce a certain way. And I do think also because they are the ones that are like as part of my social circle, they just ultimately want the best for me. Um, so I think those are big reasons about for I guess the ultimate positivity or support that I've been receiving. Um, I can't say the same is necessarily true for society as a whole. I know there's a big religious aspect to it, and that's not to say I don't have religious people within my circle, but yeah, no one that's really come forth, with that type of stance about it.
So no one has come to you and said, I don't know, either a close friend or in your family, you can't do this. It's against our religion. And I don't
Correct.
know, you could tell me if you're religious yourself or not, but has anyone specifically said that to you?
Nope, no one has said that. So I am religious. I've kind of talked about it on X, but my faith has gone up and down, and I've never really been like super like devoted or anything like that. So it's still like a journey for me. And I guess so then in terms of like my family and close friends, I don't have anyone that's really deeply entrenched in their faith either, I guess, that where they would come with that type of stance. My parents, they got divorced too, so there's that. It's not that it's common, but like it's not something that's new, I guess, to at least my immediate family.
That's interesting. The fact that your parents were also divorced. How did that make you feel when you realized, oh man, I'm gonna do to my kids? And again, I'm not assuming that, by when I say what you're doing to your kids, I'm not implying that that's it, they're done. It's not what
Right.
I'm saying, but I mean, they're gonna live through it. Let's put it that way. What you lived through with your parents. How did that
Sure.
make you feel when you realized that, oh man, we're gonna go through the same thing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of people that get divorced, or sorry, whose parents got divorced, they tell themselves, well, I'm not going to let that happen to myself, right? And and so as I was going through it, or difficulties in the marriage, and then ultimately getting divorced, I think one of the initial thoughts was, I can't believe that this is happening, or that I never would have thought that I would be one, to be basically following in my parents' footsteps. Now, one thing that I do want to acknowledge is that I think uh, everyone's circumstances behind like their marriage is either positive or negative, where it is leading to divorce. They all have their own separate facts. Like every relationship is unique, and so what might work for me might not work for someone else. So now, in terms of like my parents' divorce, that was a situation where, as a kid, I was 10 years old. So still like very formative years. And it actually, what I felt as a kid, improved our family situation. So maybe that affects then like my willingness, I guess, for lack of a better word, to move forward with divorce as an adult. Whereas I've heard from other people where they said, well, my parents getting divorced, it killed me as a kid. It like, it caused different kinds of trauma, or um, just a very difficult situation to deal with. And and so I never want to do that to my kids. And so, I can completely understand that, where, their facts and circumstances behind, their parents getting divorced are maybe different than mine. And now their relationship now, different than mine as well. Everyone has their own um facts and path and everything like that.
For sure. And I want to get back to the religion aspect of it, but you mentioned something interesting, the fact that your kids are early teens, let's say,
Yep.
and then this divorce is happening now as opposed to you when you were 10.
Yep.
How much of an impact do you think it has, the fact that they are older? Is it better that it happens now as opposed to when they were 6, 7, 8 years old?
I think that's very fact dependent. Um, I would say, as it might apply to my own kids specifically, it's hard to say. I can try and reflect on it, and I think maybe generally I could say, well, kids when they're younger, um, they might not understand as much, and maybe that's helpful. But I think again, a lot of it depends on the actual dynamic of their parents, the overall environment, um, and again, that'll differ across each family. So, yeah, I don't know. It is really hard to say. I have heard stories where kids are older, and when their parents get divorced, it blows their minds and just kind of like rocks their world. So again, I think it's just very fact specific.
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think? Is this going to affect your kids? And if so, how? Aside from having their routines disrupted, because let's face it, the routine has been broken down, right? So whereas they were used to having mom and dad at home, now it's going to be, and well, you can, if I can ask you, what sort of arrangement do you guys have in terms of custody?
Sure. Yeah, we split custody. I think there's like a common, at least from what we had researched on our own, like a common 50-50 split, where one parent gets 2 days in a row, the other parent gets the next 2 days, and then they alternate basically Friday through Sunday. So that's what we do. So the kids are moving back and forth. They have stuff in both places. But to get to your question, I think there's an adjustment for everyone, including us as the parents, in terms of just getting used to basically having two households. And that's a bit challenging for kids. But I think that's where part of it falls on the parents to try and ease that transition and adjustment phase.
Has it been annoying for them, or like does it bother? Oh man, I forgot my stuff at dad's place, or oh, and then I'll only see it in 2 days, or oh, where are we again in 2 days? And like they're talking amongst each other, and
Right.
routine wise, has it been troublesome or it's been going smoothly?
No, I think there, you bring up the example of like leaving something at one person's home. I think that is kind of been the biggest stress factor, at least just from communicating with them. In terms of just kind of bouncing back and forth, that hasn't been too bad. Both my kids are pretty active, so even on days where it's not a particular parent's custody time, I think sometimes we have, or a lot of times we have to work together to basically work out, manage the logistics behind their activities. So for us in particular, I don't think it's that part of it is too bad.
Okay. And from what you're telling me, it sounds like the relationship with your soon-to-be ex-wife is going well. It's still amicable, so you're on good
Yeah,
terms.
yeah, it's as with any relationship, there are ups and downs. But overall, I think both of us are committed to, making sure that we have like a good relationship, working relationship where we can co-parent the kids as best as possible. And you know, going going back to my parents' divorce, it wasn't like that. So
Okay.
even though I had said, well, I don't want to get divorced and ended up doing that, I know how rough that type of dynamic between the divorced parents can add a ton of additional stress. So that's definitely something that I want to work my hardest at and be very purposeful about not having it be that way.
How was the thought process for you with coming to terms with this decision? Was there a lot of, oh man, we can't do this. Even things though things are not great, I think generally speaking, it's better for the children to have their parents stay together because you hear a lot about, society in general, but online as well, on social media, within, the parenting groups. The general consensus, or so it seems, is that children that come from divorce come out or are most prone to come out with issues, different kinds of issues. So a lot of people seem to think that parents should almost force themselves to stay together for the kids. And, that's the common theme, stay together
Yep.
for the kids.
Yep.
So how much did that weigh into your decision for you and your wife?
I would say for a while that probably was a factor. But I do have a lot of thoughts on that. Now, I have no psychology background at all, so nothing that I say is necessarily based in research, and could very easily or very possibly be refuted by actual research. I guess my thought on it is, and I can only speak from personal experience.
Sure.
And whoever can relate, great. But I'll base it both off of my experience as the child and now my experience as the divorcee. Um, I would say that uh, in general, I agree. I think the preferred path is to be able to stay together, have like a firm nuclear family with the both parents involved, like it in the family unit or as part of the family unit. But if things, so as you know, and as a lot of these other dads on social media will know, uh, I think you need both parties to be able to work together, to make a successful marriage. And if you don't have that, I feel like potentially by maintaining a certain status quo, the environment, even though the two parents are still together, may not be great for the kids. It might um, create certain damage to them or trauma just by the nature of what the environment is like. And as like an added element to that, I think if the kids continue to grow up and see the dynamic, an unhealthy dynamic between the parents, that maybe that's normalized for them. And then it becomes more likely then that they will repeat that kind of cycle as well. And just from my own perspective, I don't know if that's the best thing for them either. Number one, to be growing up with in an unhealthy familial environment, and then number two, to think that that's normal, and basically just continue to repeat that cycle. So that's kind of my view on it, and I think ultimately, some of the thinking behind moving forward with it.
That makes a lot of sense, and I have to agree with what you're saying. I can't imagine how it could be good for any child to stay in an environment in a house where the people are, and I'm not saying that was the case for you, but people don't love each other anymore, and they're constantly fighting and yelling at each other. And I don't know, it's probably the case where it gets pretty nasty sometimes. First of all, do you want your kids to witness that? You could possibly be traumatizing them in the process. And also, like you said, you're what kind of example are you setting? That this is this normal? Is it
Mhm.
okay that my parents are arguing every day and yelling at each other? So yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And I'm not anti-divorce. So you know what? If it's better for the two people involved and also the kids to move on, then if everybody's going to be better off, then by all means do it.
Right.
You know?
And one thing that I want to not clarify, but just kind of add on there. I don't think it necessarily needs to just be an environment where there is like a lot of like open fighting and yelling. Um, poor communication can come, I think, with silence and isolation as well.
Right.
And that also, as you know, is very unhealthy for any relationship, but especially a marital one. And again, if kids grow up watching their parents, either really just not engaging or not having this loving relationship, again, then that's going to be what they see and know. Even if they have some sense that this isn't right, just the fact that they're witnessing this day in and day out, it's hard for them to not be influenced in that way. Um, and so, I think it takes a very reflective kid and young adult to be able to understand and know that this is wrong, and then really kind of go against the current and try to do something different. Even if I feel like even if kids know something is wrong, it's just very easy just to fall back and just continue to do the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're right. It could take shape in any way or form, really. It could also be, like you said, if it's a couple, okay, they're not fighting, they're not yelling at each other, but they're not loving towards each other either. So, you know, the kids don't see their parents hugging a lot, or
Yeah.
they don't hear their father saying to their mother, "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" There's no loving terms like that on a daily basis. Then they might think that it's normal for their parents to be cold almost towards each other, you know,
Yep.
which is not normal, obviously. I mean, we know that, but kids don't, right? So for sure that will have a big impact on them.
Right.
Chris, let me ask you, how much effort was put into trying to save the marriage before you came to the realization that, you know what, we did our best, we tried everything?
I won't get into too many details, but
Sure.
I think we both put in different various efforts to try and make it work, and different levels of counseling, and I think, well, we had decided to get divorced more than a year ago, then decided to try and work it out again, but then after that portion. Ultimately decided that it wasn't going to happen. So from my perspective, and I'll only speak from my perspective, I feel like there were efforts put in, uh, and ultimately just you know wasn't meant to be, I guess.
Got it. Okay, so both you mentioned, and I think that's great. Both you both put in the effort. You both tried, didn't work out. There was some counseling involved, like you said. I'm assuming it was marriage counseling.
Sure. Yep.
Okay,
I also I did do individual counseling as well. I think even aside from marital problems, I do think, and this might be a controversial statement, but everyone could use some sort of counseling. I think.
Yeah, no,
So
that's not controversial. I think you're right.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody's got issues, man.
we all have issues
Come on.
that might vary from person to person, but I think in the interest of like self-improvement and mental health, I think everyone could use some level of counseling.
Okay, so how much time, let's say, w was the effort phase of it all? Of like, okay, on this day, you both said, I think we need to work on us. And then how much time went by and then came to the decision it's not working.
Yeah, I guess that's a hard question to answer and pinpoint because I think it is something that was just kind of like all throughout our entire marriage. I think there was kind of that this discussion about trying to work it out, and I think and trying to improve. But that it has there was like ups and downs, progress, and then no progress or negative progress. And so it's I can't necessarily pinpoint like a start and then other than the ultimate like end when it was just um that was it.
Okay, got it. What would you say, and this is in your experience, okay, so I'm not, I'm not assuming you did some research on this, but what would you say is the number one reason people get a divorce?
Well, I would say poor communication. I think that's a big one. Probably not speaking each other's love language, maybe.
Okay.
I think because you can have two people speaking who have different love languages, and if you're not if you're speaking your love language but not theirs, then maybe they don't feel loved. And I think that works both ways. So, not to say that either one of those are you know have to do with my marriage, but that's two things that I could see as being damaging to the relationship.
Would you say that people spend enough time before getting married, sitting down together and setting expectations in terms of which religion will teach the kids if two people that are getting married have different religious backgrounds, how to discipline the kids, what to expect in terms of love language, like you just mentioned,
Mhm.
what kind of values are we going to promote within the household? Do you think people talk enough about that before getting married and having kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. There's no way for me to really know like how many people do these things. It's not something that I've talked about with my married friends. Whether they've done that or not. I think a lot of times, if you if you've been dating or you know the person before getting married and having kids, I think there's already some idea about some of those things. Um, but I think something that is very helpful, at least for religious families, but would be for across the board, is some type of premarital counseling, where you can whatever the specific counseling goes through, but things like love language and identifying those and just kind of setting expectations, understanding what is involved of you in your roles, respective roles as a spouse. I think that's very helpful. Um, but I think a lot of times, aside from just like really big like philosophical ideas, uh, a lot of it you're not going to find out until you're actually going through the process, right? Like you can talk about, oh, this is how we're going to deal with a certain stressful situation or conflict, right? And like from a cognitive standpoint, like it all sounds good, and yeah, I can do that. But then once you're in the relationship and are actually dealing with like the emotional side of things, a lot of that can go right out the window, you know. As if you're not, don't know if trained is the right word, but basically, used to handling certain levels of stress and or conflict.
Another thing I often think about when it comes to people getting a divorce is, without jumping to any conclusions, is always, did they give it a real shot? Or is it, divorce has become so common that it's the easy way out now? It's a quick solution. And I mean, look, I'm not saying it's not an actual quick solution in terms of, paperwork and all that stuff, all that legal stuff, but is it just easy to just give up? Do people give up too quickly? Are some marriages, can some of them be saved? My initial thought would be yes, of course, but I'm interested to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, I think there definitely is a lot of that. Again, kind of going back to like the you see so many celebrities they get married and then months later they're already getting divorced. Now they have like different resources available to them,
Is it
and so
glorified, do you think, because of the whole Hollywood thing aspect of?
no, I wouldn't necessarily say it's glorified. I just think maybe marriage isn't treated as sacredly because of that. But I don't know, that's not a discussion that I've actually had with someone, or other, married couples or divorced people. But I do think there is the idea that it is like an escape route. And so, maybe uh, you do say you want to put in work and try to work things out, but knowing that is available to them, maybe they don't push themselves as much as they could.
Okay. Chris, I'm interested to hear about you. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm doing great. I think uh part of my goal post marriage and divorce life is really to try and just improve myself. And the divorce is happening, and so I think with anything, the way that you characterize it can have a great effect on your life. And so when you have something that's negative or generally uh, thought of as a negative, if you view it positively or find some positives to pull out of the situation, then there can still be good that comes from it. And that's basically the approach that I've wanted to take with the divorce. Like I said, initially it was, oh, I can't believe this actually is the path that I ended up going, didn't want that. But now it's like, well, now I can be maybe do certain things that I didn't when I was married.
Party every night?
Yeah, no, that's
Just
something
kidding.
I haven't done. Um, yeah, but just in
Is that a
general,
misconception? Did I just pull out a stereotype of the guy that you you just announced to me that you're getting divorced, and it's like, to me sounds great. Oh yeah, man, you're gonna have so much fun now.
I'm sure there are plenty
I
of
don't want to
people.
be that guy.
No, I'm not that guy either. But I think when you're married, you have and with kids, you have your kids and family that take priority. Um, Now, when you're divorced, you still have your kids, but with the custody arrangement, you have them less, right? You don't have your spouse that you need to be prioritizing. So really, it does free up a lot of like actual time. I think it does free up uh some mental capacity as well, that can be used to do other things. And like I said, focus on yourself. And so, I know like a lot of like the dads and married guys do work out, and prioritize that. But I think there are a lot of married guys out there who don't do that. And whether they're too tired, or don't have the time, or don't make the time, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, that's one area that I think can open up. And I think there are a lot of other things, and some of it I've talked about on X and put out there, but hobbies or other opportunities to be hang around other people maybe. um I think there's a lot that can be done that would be very beneficial for emotional and mental health of the particular person.
Yeah, that sounds like you're putting a positive spin to it, and that's I think that's amazing, you know. Why not use this experience to better yourself
Yeah.
and if you can get shredded in the process, why not?
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think that's the idea. I think you could have people who feel sorry for themselves, or and it all, again, the facts differ, whether if you were the one that initiated it, I'm sure it's a different feeling than if your spouse was the one that initiated it, or even it being a mutual decision. So like I don't want to necessarily jump in there and say, hey, like, if you're feeling down, don't feel down anymore, but I again, just in general, when you can um, just have a positive spin on things, then I think that's just better, regardless of the situation. Not just divorce, just any type of rough patch that you're going through in life. You find certain positives, and it could turn the situation around.
For sure. And Chris, I'm curious to know, are you turned off to the whole marriage idea now? Or are you, look, I know it's way too early, okay?
Yeah,
But it's probably a question that everybody has on their minds. Would you get remarried?
I would say with the right person, yes. Uh, I think initially I was like, no way, But as time has gone on, um, I could see that being the case with the right person, and I think, with enough self-reflection and understanding of what went wrong in your own marriage and things like that. Um, there's in addition to the positive spin that I was talking about, I think you can learn a lot from your failed marriage to be able to do better in your second marriage. Now, we did talk about like kind of certain nuances with the divorce statistics, um, and with like second and third marriages, the divorce rate actually increases. And I think the problem with that is um, a lot of people don't learn from their mistakes. Maybe they think that, well, it was just the other person, so let me just find a new person and it'll be better. And then it turns out not being better. But I think with most failed marriages, well, I don't even want to say that. I think if we can like reflect on what we could have done better in all different kinds of ways, whether that's in the marriage, also identifying the particular person, what we're looking for, what we're offering and doing, then yeah, I think that opens the door for ideally like a more successful second marriage. It's just like I said, if you're going to just kind of repeat the same like way of operating, then I could see that's why the subsequent marriage or divorce statistics are even higher.
For sure. And Chris, I want to get back to the whole religious aspect of it that we mentioned earlier,
Sure.
because I feel like that's probably where most of the stigma is coming from, right? In
Yeah.
terms of drawbacks and like people saying, "Oh my God, how can they do this?" You know. So, what would your response be? And you mentioned that nobody outright told you you shouldn't do this. It's against our religion.
Right.
But you know people are thinking it probably, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, I've seen it plenty on social media. So yeah.
There you go. So what's your answer to these people that are so religious to the point where they can't even look at you or like agree at all with what you're doing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Something that I've thought a lot about. Like I said, I'm not super religious, so A lot of what I say could potentially be off base from like a religious aspect, and from the Bible itself. But the way I view it is basically the idea behind that argument and that stance and stigma is that divorce is a sin. God says don't do it, or there's one exception for it, but basically you shouldn't do it, so it's a sin. And um, and so my response is, okay, yeah, sure, it's a sin, but everybody here is sinning every single day. Like that's we're all born sinners, right? And that's the whole reason that um Jesus sacrificed himself, because we're all sinners and just such horrible people in comparison to him, right? And so this idea that, okay, well, we're just going to single out divorce as this big no-no when the Bible is God's word and teachings are being violated left and right. But then those other ways, we're just gonna conveniently not address those, but we're just gonna focus on the divorce as being just as like this abhorrent sin. I think is, I don't know, kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Sure.
Um, and I just think we should all strive to be to follow the Bible and our religious teachings, but we're all going to fall short in every single area of the Bible, and I think that includes marriage and then subsequently divorce, obviously with the 50% divorce rate, and those aren't all non-religious people too, right?
Mm.
Um, so so I think you know even though divorce is considered a sin, that's not like, well, now you're going to hell, right? You can still, as with any other kind of sin, and any other kind of mistake or failure, you try to learn from it and do better and just continue striving to be as good of a person as you can be. And so that's what I would say is the goal, or should be the goal, as when you get divorced and commit that sin, is to just keep trying to live a fulfilling life, and for those that believe in God, a God loving and following Jesus's teachings, regardless of whether you're divorced or not.
Yeah, I mean, you could still be a good person if you're divorced, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
It's
I
not the end of
don't,
the world for you.
yeah. So I don't, I understand where it's coming from, in terms of the Bible and what the Bible says, but I don't understand the hate towards it. Like, why single that one out? Like you said, there's
Yeah.
so many other sins, and why are you focusing on this one?
Yeah.
It's
And then I
probably
would
not the
say,
worst one, right?
yeah, I mean, you have murderers
Yeah.
that are saved, right? Or, can be redeemed, I guess. Um, and so, yeah, and I think, when we circle back to like what we were saying about, people staying together, but like, the Bible lays out, you know, the role of what the husband is supposed to be, and what the wife is supposed to be, and what certain interactions between them are supposed to be. Now, you can stay together and therefore not commit the sin of divorce, but if you're not doing those other things to like fulfill the what the Bible says you should be doing in your marriage, then you're not living a godly marriage anyway. And now I'm not saying, well, then you need to go get divorced. No, like, but ideally you start, you put the work in, and you guys do develop that type of relationship. But again, if you're not going to do that, then sure, you might not be getting divorced, but it's not what the Bible says a marriage is supposed to be.
Right. And you know what, Chris? I started following you on social, well, X specifically.
Yep.
Uh, and the reason for that, because to me, your content was just a different voice,
Right.
a different message. And you can get into this if you'd like. You're obviously not out here to promote divorce. you don't want to market it. That's not what you're doing.
Right.
But you're trying to express yourself, and maybe can we say get sort of get rid of that stigma towards
Yeah,
divorce? Is that maybe your mission now?
that's part of it. I would definitely say to combat the that stigma, because I think what comes with that stigma is shame. And so if people are giving into that stigma, they're feeling shameful about, being a divorcee. And when you're living in shame, then, there's emotional, mental damage being done, and you can't live as fulfilling of a life otherwise. And then when you throw in the aspect of being a parent, if you're living in shame, then it's hard for you to really go out and be the best parent that you can be as well if you're not right emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Um, and so, just beyond yourself, I think there is an impact on your kids as well. So yes, my goal is to fight that stigma and just to help other people, whether they're divorced, feel like they want to be divorced, but again, with that stigma, aren't going to, just kind of help them see that, what, like, despite that negative stigma, that's we don't have to give in to that. We can still live our lives to the fullest. Because that obviously those people aren't alone. 50% of marriages end in that. And how much, I'm sure there's still like some large percentage of the remaining 50% where it's not this healthy marriage that we're talking about.
Yeah.
um so like how many are feeling crappy in their marriage, either about themselves or just kind of like in a dark emotional and mental space because of their uh how their marriage is going. And so it's really just to provide a positive spin, given this negative stigma that is out there about it.
What would you say? You just mentioned it a little bit. What would you say to somebody that is struggling in their marriage? What advice would you give to them?
That's a difficult one to answer because again, there can be all different kinds of reasons for why their marriage is struggling.
Let's go back to the main reasons that you mentioned earlier in the podcast, where it was communication and love language. Just focus on that. So
Sure,
it's nothing, because of adultery or anything like that.
sure.
It's in terms
Okay.
of communication.
Um, I guess number one, I would say just worry about what you can control because you can want the other to do, this and that. But ultimately you can't force them to do certain things. So I think number one, focus on what you can control, and with that, in those areas, reflect: am I communicating? How what is our communication like? What am I doing? Um, and then as we get into the love language, try to see, am I doing certain things to speak my spouse's love language. Let me just backtrack a sec though. I think this is advice to try and get them to work it out. So like there still has to be this desire for them to want to work it out. If they
Yeah.
don't want to work it out, if they're gonna say, I don't want to work it out, I'm miserable, I'm just staying together for the kids or whatever. Like my church says I shouldn't be getting divorced. Um, but like, but I really don't want to work it out. Again, I'm not going to tell that person, well, go ahead and get divorced. But you know, I would say, regardless, a frank conversation with the spouse about where you're at and try to understand where they're at and see if it is something that can be worked out. And then getting into, and then if that leads to yes, maybe, or even a maybe, then you can start reflecting on, well, okay, what can I be doing better? And then, yeah, of course, if you want to work it out, I think counseling is always a good thing. You have like a neutral third party to try and like chime in um, and things like that. But um, I think it first starts off really being truthful to yourself, and then to your spouse, whether or not you actually want it to work, and what are your motivations for wanting it to work. Because if you don't really want a healthy, if your goal isn't to have a healthy relationship, or your motivation, it's going to be hard.
For sure. Chris, thank you so much for sharing all this with me on Dads with Mics. Look, I know for sure it cannot be easy. I don't know what you're going through because I haven't gone through it myself, but
Sure.
I can only assume that it's probably very difficult for you and your children, and your wife. So I want to thank you again for sharing your story with me. Where can people find you and tell me what are you working on?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first, I want to thank you for having me on, and listening. I think I really appreciate the airtime. Um, if people want to hear more from me, I am on X. My X handle is at Daddy Divorcee, DaddyDivorcee. I am on Instagram as well, but whatever's on Instagram is on X, and I am more active on X. Um, what I'm working on right now, so as part of my bigger goal in just having this the positivity and I guess inspiration for others in similar position. I am trying to set the stage for like kind of like a safe community for people where they can go be around others. They can talk about their experiences, share their experiences, get advice, and just be in a place where they're not going to be judged, and just kind of be with others. So that's like a bigger mission and goal of mine is to be able to create that space. So that's a long-term project that I am working on.
Awesome. Chris, thanks again, man.
All right, Ren. Thank you.